Hey everyone, welcome to part 2 of this maybe official, maybe unofficial 2-part series of determining which game is better between Inside and Limbo. I had a great time putting together that video for Limbo, so now it's Inside's turn to have the spotlight. Inside is of course a puzzle platformer developed and published by Playdead, and it was released in 2016. In this game, like in Limbo, you start out controlling an unnamed character who is quickly on the run for some apparent reason, and through various puzzles are figuring out why and figuring out your way through the game. The biggest difference you'll notice right away is that Inside is not all in black and white. It still has a pretty dark and gloomy aesthetic to it, and certainly a moody atmosphere, but it's not as artsy and almost dreamlike like Limbo was. What's going on in this game is also much different right off the bat, specifically in regards to the story. I didn't talk much about the story at all for Limbo because, well, there isn't much of one. You can sort of read between the lines in that game and determine one for yourself, and I do think that there's a profound story to be told in it, at least depending on how you interpret it, but for this game, it's much less subtle. There's a certain dystopian feel to what's going on here, and there are mass groups of people who are being mind controlled for an unknown purpose, and it's through this mind control helmet where the gameplay does take a big left turn from Limbo. The main focus though is still physics based, and much of what you'll be doing here has a similar feel to Limbo, and it's very fluid and always feels like you have a good control on the movements of what you're doing, but once you get into the mind of these almost zombie-like humans, it changes things up a lot as you need to figure out how to use them to get you further, and it can sometimes go multiple levels here where you're controlling a zombie who's controlling another zombie, and it's a really unique gameplay style. Another key difference here is that you can swim in this game. There's a big moment early on in the game when you will need to swim underwater to avoid being shot, and later on you get access to this underwater orb that you can charge up and power through walls, and it was really cool to see all those different kinds of underwater visuals and also the underwater physics that I certainly wasn't expecting to see here. Really in general, I thought they did a great job of just tinkering enough with a lot of the puzzle elements in this game to give it enough of an original feel that didn't always remind you of Limbo. I loved one of the initial puzzles in the barn where you have to lure these chickens in and use them to hit into a box that you would need to go further with, and also using the surroundings a lot more, like with ladders and holes in the floors that would lead to other rooms, and it all made for a much more expansive world that offered a lot of opportunities. I think it's always tough for a follow-up to be better than the original, although it seems like that's not always the case with games because it only gives you time to develop on that gameplay that you set up in the first one even more and use the usual success of that first game to propel the second one forward, and also have the ability to make it bigger and try out new things, but that's where it can get a little bit tricky. Bigger and better or new doesn't always mean that it's going to be good, and there's probably a million examples of that out there. But what I love most about Inside is that it didn't try to be Limbo 2. In fact, they probably would have made a ton of money if they had made Limbo 2, but this was different in almost every way. Yeah, the gameplay feels mostly the same, the music and sound design is also mostly the same, but it's still a completely different game. When I play these games, especially back to back, I get very different things out of both of them. Where Inside is an almost literal work of art come to life that's beautiful to look at all times, Inside goes into this sci-fi dystopia route with dogs that chase after you and people in vans driving up on you and shooting you, weird mind control puzzles where you need to match what everyone is doing so you won't be noticed as being a normal human, and it just progressively goes to weirder, bizarro places that I would have never expected it to. And there's an absolutely jaw-dropping ending to this game as well that I think will usually determine how someone feels about it. I loved it, and it's actually one of my favorite endings to any game that I've played before, but I know many people who thought it was way too over the top and weren't a fan of it, so that could ultimately be the difference maker between these two games. I didn't really mention Limbo's ending in part 1, but the ending in that one is also a bit divisive. And I loved both of these endings for different reasons, and in a way it's kind of the perfect example of how different both of these games really are. And so I guess that now leaves me with the question, which one is the best? And this is where this debate could kind of turn into that classic best versus favorite thing that can always cause a lot of problems. I talked about this before, but I am someone who thinks that you should separate best and favorite instead of combining them into one. If you ask me which game I like more out of the two, and which one I enjoy playing more, and which one I would rather play if I could only pick one, it would be Inside. Maybe it's because the character is faster, or maybe it's because I prefer weird sci-fi stories and the whole mind control thing is just a really unique way of figuring out these puzzles, but I do ultimately think that Inside is the more fun game of the two. But do I think Limbo is the better game? I do. I really do think it's the better game of the two that does everything exactly right for what it's trying to do, and neither of these games are terribly long, but there are parts of Inside where it kind of felt like they added them in there just so that the game could be a little longer, and there's honestly nothing wrong with that. But it doesn't quite have that perfect flow of Limbo where every single moment seems to naturally blend in with the next as if it wasn't even made by a team of people, it just always existed. Okay, so I really should just end this video now before I start making no sense at all, but yeah, so the best game that Playdead has made in my eyes is Limbo. It hurts to say that just a little bit because I love Inside so much and it's one of my favorite games of all time, but like I said at the top of the first video, this is all just for fun anyway. Both of these games are masterpieces and it doesn't matter at all which one I think is the best. I just really wanted to talk about them and play them again like I'm sure I'll continue to do throughout the years. I have no idea if Playdead is working on something new right now, but they absolutely hit 2 home runs so far, so of course me and I'm sure many other people will be extremely excited for whatever they do next. And it was a ton of fun to do this quick 2-part series. I would love to do more videos like this, maybe combine them into one video next time and see which format works better. And of course I'd love to hear your feedback on it, what you thought I could do better or what you really liked about them. But yeah, that's all I got for this one. I hope you're all doing well out there and having a great December. I hope to see you in the next video, and until then, take care everybody.